The conference room smelled faintly of stale coffee and polished wood. My brothers, Ethan, Oliver, and James, were already there when I walked in, each perched around the sleek glass table, eyes flicking from their watches to the door like they had somewhere more important to be. "Well, look who finally made it," Ethan drawled, without glancing up from his smartwatch. "Some of us have meetings that actually pay," Oliver added, tapping away on his tablet. I slipped into the last empty chair, ignoring the barbs. At 29, I was the youngest and the only one who'd stayed in Portland to look after Dad in his last years. I was used to being their favorite punchline. Indie game designer, they'd scoff. Dad's little charity case. Across the table, Mr. Hawthorne, Dad's attorney, cleared his throat. "Now that everyone's present, we can proceed," he said, opening a slim silver briefcase. "Your father, Professor Richard Ellis, left very precise instructions regarding his estate." Finally, James muttered, "Maybe we can offload that old house and split the cash like normal people." As I was saying, Mr. Hawthorne continued firmly, removing a stack of documents. Professor Ellis outlined the following bequests. "To Ethan Ellis, I leave my 1969 Ducati and the family cabin near Mount Hood." Ethan grinned, already tallying resale numbers in his head. "To Oliver Ellis, I leave my house on Hawthorne Boulevard and all its contents, except those listed elsewhere." Oliver's face lit up. In today's market, the house was worth at least $900,000. "To James Ellis, I leave my retirement accounts and investment portfolio, valued at roughly $600,000. James tried for a solemn nod but shot Ethan a discreet thumbs up. "And to Amelia Ellis," Mr. Hawthorne paused and pulled out an old leather portfolio, cracked along the edges. "I leave my patent collection and all accompanying documentation." The silence lasted barely 2 seconds before the laughter erupted. "Patents?" Ethan gasped between wheezes. "Dad's wacky science projects." Oliver wiped a tear from his eye. "Oh God, Amelia, congrats on your worthless doodles." James was doubled over, silent laughter shaking his shoulders as he pointed at the portfolio, like it was the punchline to a joke they'd all memorized. Mr. Hawthorne waited patiently for them to quiet down. "There's also a letter for Amelia, personally." My fingers trembled as I unfolded the single page, Dad's familiar handwriting slanting across the paper. "My dearest Amelia, of all my children, you were the only one who ever sat with me as I sketched out circuits and theories. You were the only one who understood that sometimes true value isn't obvious right away. These patents are the result of 40 years of research into advanced haptic technologies and immersive interface design. Many dismissed them as impractical, but you, my dreamer, believed in what others couldn't see." I blinked back sudden tears as the voices around the table faded into a dull hum. Because in that moment, I realized Dad hadn't left me nothing. He'd left me everything. "You always have. Be patient. The world has a way of catching up to ideas that were ahead of their time. Love, Dad." I stared at Dad's signature, my eyes prickling. Slowly, I glanced down at the first page of the portfolio. Patent number 6,142,277. "I had a feeling about that one," I murmured under my breath. "Haptic interfaces?" Ethan snorted, still half laughing as he leaned back in his chair. He spent the entire 90s trying to sell companies on people wanting to feel their screens. Total waste. While we were busting our asses in college, he was tinkering in his workshop, Oliver chimed in. Now Amelia gets to inherit all his useless blueprints. Honestly, perfect match. I hugged the folder tighter against my chest. Dad poured decades into this work. I shot back, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. "And what did it get him?" James said, shaking his head. "A professor's salary and a garage full of junk no one wanted." "Let's face it, Leah, you got the consolation prize." They left soon after, eager to chase their new windfalls. Ethan peeled out of the parking lot on Dad's vintage Ducati. Oliver was already calling a realtor about the Hawthorne Boulevard house. James paced around the sidewalk, phone pressed to his ear, mumbling to financial advisors. I sat behind the wheel of my battered Subaru, the leather folder heavy on my lap. Eventually, I drove back to my apartment in the Buckman neighborhood, Portland's neon signs flashing by my window like silent taunts. Later that night, I spread the contents of the folder across my living room floor. Dozens of patents, each page thick with diagrams and technical jargon. Haptic feedback systems, pressure-sensitive panels, multi-touch gesture recognition. Words I barely grasped, yet familiar from Dad's late-night lectures over cups of mint tea. Patent number 6,142,277, method and apparatus for providing tactile feedback in touch-sensitive devices. Filed in 1997. Granted in 1999. Dad hadn't just filed patents. He'd kept every rejection letter too. Letters from giants like Nokia, Palm, IBM, technology not commercially viable. No consumer market for tactile screens. Users prefer physical buttons. Each letter dated years before smartphones, before tablets, before touchscreens became the center of the universe. Days turned into 2 weeks. I read technical specifications, watched tutorial videos, and Googled terms like haptic actuators and capacitive touch grids until my eyes blurred. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Amelia Ellis? This is Rebecca Chan from the legal department at Apple Incorporated. I'm hoping you have a few moments to discuss your late father's patent portfolio. My pulse slammed into my throat. Apple? As in Apple? Yes, ma'am. We've been conducting a review of historical patents related to our current technologies. It appears several of your father's filings might cover innovations we're actively utilizing. The folder slipped from my fingers, papers scattering over the floor like white leaves. In that moment, I heard Dad's voice again in my head. Be patient. The world has a way of catching up. If you've ever believed in dreams others called worthless, stay with me and hit subscribe. Because what happened after Apple called changed everything I thought I knew about my father and about myself. Specifically, patent number 6,142,277. My legs buckled, and I collapsed onto my thrift store couch, the leather folder sliding from my fingers. The haptic feedback patent, I whispered. Yes, Rebecca Chan confirmed, among others. Miss Ellis, our initial review indicates Apple has been utilizing technologies described in at least 12 of Professor Ellis's patents for roughly the past decade. We'd like to discuss a licensing agreement. My mind struggled to catch up. Retroactively, I croaked. Correct. I swallowed hard. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a game designer. I just inherited these. I understand, Rebecca said gently. May I strongly suggest that you retain legal counsel? This is a significant matter. Our preliminary calculations for retroactive licensing fees are considerable. How considerable, Miss Ellis? I can't provide exact figures outside formal negotiations, but given the extent of usage across multiple Apple product lines over the past 10 years, we're prepared to begin discussions in the neighborhood of $15 million. My phone wobbled in my trembling hand. $15 million. Only $1 million as a starting point. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor. I stared at it like it had spoken in tongues. The next day, I hired a patent attorney. David Chen, son of one of Dad's former colleagues, came highly recommended. He nearly spilled his coffee all over his suit when he flipped through Dad's patents. Amelia, he said, eyes wide as he scanned page after page, your father was a genius. These patents, they're foundational. Not just Apple, Samsung, Google, Microsoft. Basically, every company manufacturing touchscreen devices could be using his technology. But they all turned him down 20 years ago, I murmured. David shook his head. Because they couldn't see the future. Your father could. He patented solutions before the problems even existed. He was too far ahead of his time. The negotiations stretched into months. Apple was only the beginning. Once word spread that Professor Richard Ellis's patents were being enforced, the floodgates opened. One by one, every major tech corporation came knocking. They'd all buried versions of Dad's innovations deep in their devices, assuming the patents were forgotten relics. David worked magic. He didn't just secure lump sum settlements. He structured ongoing royalties. Every smartphone, every tablet, every touchscreen product featuring haptic feedback or multi-touch gestures would generate income for me going forward. Your father didn't just leave you patents, David said quietly one evening, closing the final contract binder. He left you a piece of every touchscreen device sold for the next decade. The numbers were staggering. Retroactive licensing fees totaled nearly $200 million across all the companies. The projected royalties were even higher. Life-changing sums I struggled to wrap my head around. One evening, I sat in my Buckman apartment, staring blankly at my online bank balance, trying to absorb how many zeros it now contained. When my phone rang, Ethan's name lit up the screen. "Hey, Leah," he said, voice oddly casual. A weird question, but have you heard from any tech companies about Dad's old papers? Ethan's voice was casual, but I could hear the strain underneath. Why? I kept my voice carefully neutral. Some lawyer called me, he continued a little too quickly, asking about patent transfers, said there might be value in Dad's research. I pressed my lips together. You ended up with all that junk, Ethan said. But if there's money involved, we should split it. I mean, family is family, right? I let out a short laugh. What happened to calling them my useless blueprints? Come on, Leah, don't be like that. I could almost see him rolling his eyes through the phone. We all know Dad would want us to share everything equally, like how you shared the Ducati, the house, and the bank accounts. That's different, Ethan argued. Those were specifically left to us. And the patents were specifically left to me, I said flatly. But you don't even understand all that technical stuff, he sputtered. Look, if there's a few $1,000 in it, you should share. We're family. A few thousand? I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. Ethan, Apple alone paid me $50 million in retroactive licensing fees. The silence on the line was so complete I could hear my own pulse pounding. 50 million, Ethan's voice cracked like glass. And that's just Apple, I continued, my tone calm and almost gentle. Samsung paid $60 million, Google $45 million, Microsoft's still running their numbers. I paused for effect. Oh, and the ongoing royalties? About $10 million a year, conservatively. You're lying. Patent number 6,142,277, I said. Look it up. Dad invented the haptic feedback systems used in practically every touchscreen device on the planet, and about 50 other innovations you all used to laugh at. But, he faltered. You thought Dad was a failure, tinkering with worthless junk. You guys took the house and the Ducati and the accounts because they were obvious money. You laughed at me for getting worthless blueprints. Amelia, please, Ethan said, voice trembling now. We didn't know. How could we have known? You could have listened, I shot back, my voice rising. Just once, you could have listened when Dad talked about his work. You could have visited during his final year instead of circling like vultures waiting for him to die. That's not fair, Ethan protested. Oh, let me tell you what's fair. I drew in a steadying breath. Dad spent 40 years getting rejected, ignored, and mocked. He kept working because he believed in his ideas. He left those ideas to the only person who believed in him. That's fair. We'll contest the will, Ethan threatened. Go ahead, I said, my voice ice cold. I have excellent lawyers now. They'd love to discuss how you three divided up everything of obvious value and left me with so-called worthless junk. There's very clear evidence that you all got exactly what you wanted. The call ended with Ethan shouting about fairness and family. Before long, Oliver and James were bombarding my phone too. First with threats, then with teary apologies. But Mr. Hawthorne had been clear. The will was ironclad. They'd claimed the obvious prizes. I'd made a gamble on belief. I bought a house in Southeast Portland with my first royalty check. Nothing lavish. Dad would have hated anything flashy, but it has a wide, sunlit garage that I converted into a proper workshop with tools and equipment Dad could only have dreamed about during his late-night tinkering. The second check went toward founding the Professor Richard Ellis Innovation Grant, dedicated to supporting unconventional inventors, people working on ideas everyone else dismisses as impossible. Dad would have loved that. My brothers still text me sometimes. Ethan had to sell the Ducati after his startup collapsed under debt. Oliver lost the Hawthorne Boulevard house in his messy divorce. James' short-term investments vanished in a market downturn. Their messages always begin casually, updates about their kids, memories of Dad, but sooner or later, they shift into hints about money, college funds, mortgage payments, family obligations. I usually just remind them about my useless blueprints. The workshop has become my sanctuary. It smells faintly of machine oil and sawdust, full of quiet potential. I'm slowly learning to decipher Dad's work, his neat, cramped handwriting filling shelf after shelf of battered notebooks. Not just the patents, but ideas he never filed, half-finished concepts and inventions he'd only begun to explore. Dreams still waiting for their moment. Sometimes, I stand there with my fingers resting on the cool metal of one of Dad's old prototypes and imagine him beside me, eyes sparkling, launching into explanations about pressure sensors, layered touch grids, and feedback loops. He never got to see his vindication, never lived to witness a world that would one day carry his innovations in the palms of their hands. Yet he'd known something would come of it, enough to leave his life's work to the one person who might be patient enough to wait for the world to catch up. "Enjoy your stupid papers," they'd laughed. I do, every single day. With every smartphone sold, with every royalty payment that lands in my account, with every quirky inventor whose grant application I sign, I enjoy them more than I can say. Turns out, the only truly stupid thing was assuming value is always visible on the surface. Dad knew better. He left the obvious wealth to those who could only see the obvious, and he left the future to the one who believed in things that hadn't happened yet. My latest royalty statement sits open on my desk, $12,700,000 for the last quarter. Not bad for useless blueprints. Not bad at all. I'm Amelia Ellis, and if my story has taught me anything, it's this: sometimes the world laughs at what it doesn't yet understand. People might call your dreams worthless or say your work is junk. They might try to box you in with labels or decide your worth based on what's visible on the surface. But value often hides beneath what others dismiss. So I'm asking you, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever held on to an idea when everyone else called you crazy, support this journey. Subscribe, leave me a comment, and tell me about the dreams you've kept quietly alive. I'd love to hear your story, because every quiet believer deserves a moment when the world finally catches up. Guys, as you do this, please consider, I know how lonely it feels to keep believing in something no one else sees. For years, I sat in a workshop with my dad, watching him pour his brilliance into inventions that nobody wanted. Yet, it felt hopeless sometimes. But here's what I've learned: your quiet persistence matters. Your weird ideas matter, even if no one else gets it right now. Keep working, keep learning, keep sketching, tinkering, dreaming, because the future needs the things you're building today. My father left me his useless blueprints. Everyone else got the obvious wealth. But I inherited the future, and it changed my life. I want you to remember that value doesn't always come wrapped in dollar signs or applause. It can lie waiting in the back of a dusty garage, in half-finished notebooks, or inside your own quiet determination. So, if you're holding on to a dream, please don't let go. I promise, sometimes the world just needs time to catch up. And if my story proves anything, it's that what looks worthless today might be priceless tomorrow. Let's keep believing.